Hello there, people of the internet. Today is a video that is once again inspired by my discussions with other people. I've had a lot of people ask me about this because it's something that I bring up pretty repeatedly on this channel, especially since I shoot old military surplus rifles. I talk about rim lock a lot, and typically a lot of your newer shooters, they have no idea what rim lock is. I had one guy tell me he has no idea how I managed to get rim lock because he never manages to get rim lock, but he was talking about what he thought was a rimmed cartridge, but it was a rimless cartridge. Although a rimless cartridge technically still has a rim on it, that's where the extractor pulls out the round. The rim of a cartridge, in order for a cartridge to be considered a rimmed cartridge, that rim of the cartridge has to extend out past beyond the case itself. This right here is some 303 British ammunition, which is a very popular rimmed cartridge since a lot of your Enfield rifles are chambered in this right here. And the idea of rim lock is if you have 2 rounds, let's say inside of your magazine, or anything beyond 2 rounds, but at least 2 rounds inside of your magazine, and your round on top, which would be pushed forward into the chamber, is caught on the rim underneath it, then that is rim lock, and that will jam your magazine and stop this round from being pushed forward into the chamber because it is thoroughly caught on the rim of the round underneath it. Whenever I talk about rim lock, that is what I am talking about. Now, your rimless cartridges, they still have an area for the extractor to pull it out. You could consider that technically a rim of the cartridge, but it is considered rimless because the rim does not extend out past the case like it does on the 303. Now, this is not the only rimmed cartridge out there, but the Enfield rifles are definitely the most notorious for rim lock. I have some 7.62 by 54 rimmed, very similar to the 303, and it also has a rim on it, like I said, very similar to the 303. But these right here do not really, you don't have big issues with rim lock with these just because of the types of rifles that these are fired out of. Let me elaborate on that. Now, this right here is the magazine from a number 4 Mark I rifle, or number 4 Mark I Star. I can't quite remember. But this right is the magazine from one of those Enfield rifles chambered in the 303 British. And whenever these are loaded, your 303 British rounds are stacked right on top of one another. Since this is a double stack magazine, they are actually touching each other. With that direct contact, if one of the rims of the rounds is caught behind the rim of the round that is underneath it, then this round will not be pushed forward and shoved into the chamber. Thus, the rifle will be experiencing rim lock. How many more 303 rounds do I have? I have another 303. Go ahead and cram that in here. And now we will take my loaded Enfield magazine and set it aside, and I will empty that here in a minute. Now, the 7.62 by 54 rimmed, or 7.62 by 54 Russian, is oftentimes used in your Mosin Nagant rifles. However, there are plenty of other platforms out there that use this cartridge, but by far the most used rifle in this cartridge is the Mosin Nagant. And these rifles actually have a cutoff system where the round on top that is about to be fed into the chamber is not in contact with the rounds underneath. So rim lock is not a big issue with these rounds. If you look, I have a round chambered inside of the magazine of this rifle. Now, I can actually take that round and push it down further and stick it underneath that separating mechanism that is inside of the rifle. Now this round is actually down underneath where this round would sit by a significant margin, so rim lock would not be an issue with these rounds just because these rounds are not touching. Now, inside the magazine, those rounds are touching, but those rounds down there don't matter much. It's all about the round that is sitting on top that is about to be fed into the chamber. Now, you'll notice I have 3 rounds inside of this rifle. I'm sure I edited that actually loading the rifle out of the video, but trust me, I have 3 rounds loaded in this rifle. All the rounds are pushed down into the magazine, and in order for a round to be loaded up and ready to fire, the bolt on this rifle has to be closed. So as I'm closing the bolt, you'll see that no round is being loaded into the chamber. As I fully close the bolt and put it into battery, a round from that magazine, I wouldn't call it a magazine disconnect, the round separator in the magazine actually lets a round up and is in a position where that round can now be loaded into the chamber. So if I pull this bolt back down, you'll see how that round there popped up and can now be loaded into the chamber. Its original position was down a little bit further, just like that. Notice how no round was loaded into the chamber. Now this round is ready to be loaded. Typically some sort of round separating system, especially if you're rocking a box magazine, that needs to be used in order to prevent rim lock. Otherwise you need to make sure that you load your cartridges in properly. Now there are plenty of other rimmed cartridges out there that do not use a magazine system, but these right here are by far the most common rimmed cartridges that you're going to find in magazine fed rifles. The 54 rim, they're also fed through like belt fed light machine guns. In that particular case, the round is pulled back out of the belt since it can't be forced forward because of that massive rim on it. The Russians always find a really good way to design their firearms to get around that rim and make it to where rim lock is not necessarily a big deal. On a belt, though, rim lock is not really the issue. It's more so getting the cartridge out of that belt and fed into the chamber as opposed to getting it caught on another cartridge, but it still is problems caused by the rim. The reason why the Enfield series is so notorious for rim lock is because those cartridges are right on top of one another and there's no separation like there is in the Mosin. Now there's other ways to get around it. For example, 357 Magnum is a rimmed cartridge, however it is mostly fired out of revolvers. Inside of a revolver, all the rounds have their own separate chambers and none of them have to be moved around or cycled or anything like that. They just stay where they are. So you don't have to worry about the rim of one cartridge, locking onto the rim of another. Now, if you have 357 Magnum autoloaders, then rim lock becomes more of an issue, especially whenever there's no cartridge separation mechanism inside of that magazine. Or, say, 3030, or the 8mm Lebel, or any of those other cartridges that are also rimmed, that are fed from a tube magazine. As a result, since they're inside of a tube magazine, the rims are not actually interacting with one another. It is bullets front to back, stacking a tubular magazine underneath the barrel, usually, that are facing each other much like this, and they're stacked all the way inside the barrel. Having a rim in that instance is not going to cause rim lock only because the rims are not rubbing against each other. It's only inside of magazines that are of a nature where the rounds actually have the chance to lock rims is where you get the issue with rim lock for obvious reasons. But I wanted to go ahead and make this video talking about, rim lock and whatnot because I actually get it pretty regularly because I do not load my rifles properly. It's just a matter of laziness and not paying attention and whatnot. Rim lock is not the end of the world. It is pretty easy to take care of, but if you're trying to run a rifle at any real significant speed, that is whenever you start having issues. Now that being said, I am out here on my gun range. I think I've discussed rim lock in its entirety, how to prevent it. Did I talk about how to prevent it? Other than having, some sort of system in your rifle where the round being chambered is not at all being interacted with other rounds around it. How to prevent rim lock: always make sure that the round on top is loaded with the rim in front of the rim of the round underneath. This way, the round on top is able to move forward freely and it's not catching on the rim of the cartridge underneath it. So, as long as your rounds are loaded properly inside of your magazine, rim lock should not be an issue. I'm out here with my number 4 Mark I. It says number 4 Mark I in some spots, number 4 Mark II in others, and actually it doesn't say number 4 Mark I anywhere on the band. It says M47 1943. This right here was definitely one of their, as Forgotten Weapons put it, last-ditch rifles. You can definitely tell by the rear sight and just the aesthetics of the rifle. But either way, it is a rifle that I hold near and dear to my heart. The front sight protector wings are another very clear indication, and the front barrel band, and etc., etc. I recommend going to check out that video that Ian McCullum made. It's a very interesting video, and I did not know what I knew about this rifle until I had watched that video. I recommend checking it out. Now, I have these rounds properly loaded inside of this magazine, so I should not have to worry about rim lock. That being said, I only have 3 rounds because 303 British is like $1.75 right now, plus shipping, so like $2 a round right now. It's quite expensive is what I'm trying to get at. So I'm going to go ahead and launch these 3 rounds downrange just because I've been wanting to shoot this rifle for quite some time, and unfortunately I don't see 303 British getting any cheaper. The only outlets we had for cheap ammunition have been disrupted by an ammunition ban, including, well, especially for Russian firearms and steel case ammunition and your things that would not break the bank. And unfortunately, that includes the cheap steel 303 that I'm running inside of this rifle right now. This is Wolf. I forget the grainage. I've had this stuff absolutely forever because I have not wanted to burn it off because of how expensive this stuff has gotten. Back whenever I picked up this ammunition, it was only running at about 35 cents a round, something like that. I highly regret not absolutely stockpiling this stuff back whenever I was able to do so. But as time goes on, I am certain that I'll get the chance again. Oh, Nelly. That 303 round absolutely hits with some pretty mighty authority. And every time I fire this rifle, it reminds me that it's a full power cartridge with a metal butt plate on the rifle. Oh, Nelly. All right. I always want to shoot this gun, and then I remember the ammo prices and how significant the recoil is, and I'm like, yeah, maybe that gun is not the most pleasurable to shoot. Now my 9130 here, the Mosin Nagant, has a much longer barrel, so it's actually a heavier rifle as well. The recoil on this is not as bad as on the Enfield, despite the fact that the cartridges are very, very similar. And with that longer barrel on the 9130, even longer on the 1891 models, the concussive force felt from the back blast of the rifle is also quite a deal less significant. The ammunition for this is also quite a deal cheaper. We'll see how long that lasts with this ammunition ban that is taking place. Oh, Nelly. I know that this recoils less, but it still has significant recoil. The trigger on the Mosin is also not nearly as nice as the Enfield series. The Enfield almost feels like it has a two-stage trigger, whereas the Mosin feels like it's basically a piece of wire clothes hanger that is like very crudely welded to the strings of a grand piano, and you're pulling on that, dragging it across a gravel road. That's very similar to what the trigger on a Mosin Nagant feels like. Now, with the Mosin, there is no two-stage trigger. You just kind of pull the trigger nice and slow until it goes banging. It's always a surprise. Alright, well folks, I wanted to bring up Rimlock because I'm always asked about it. If you like this stuff, subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, do me a favor and like the video. Description down below, you're going to find a bunch of links. That being said, I think I'm out of things to say. So you guys go off, have a fantastic day, and thanks for watching. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.